Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. We're getting near the end of the season here. It's episode 23, and this is a show where we show you as procurement professionals the art of the possible with procurement technology. So thanks again for being here. If you're tuning in live and if you're watching the replay, all the same, thanks so much for tuning in. So today we've got a really exciting show. Graphite is on the show here with us today to discuss change management strategies for supplier relationship management tools, or SRM tools, as the acronym commonly refers to. And just before we get to our guests here, as always, a little bit of housekeeping to situate you in the season. So as you can see, we're at the tail end of the season here. We've gotten together every Friday since September to show you something around how to be successful with different types of procurement technology, whether they be sourcing, SRM, specialized solutions, spend analytics, etc. And then how to build a business case, how to think about software architecture or how it's going to fit in with other systems, change management, deployment plans, etc. And it's all culminating at the end of the month of April, April 22nd to 24th, where we're running our first inaugural virtual conference, Procure Tech Unpacked, where there's going to be demos of all these solutions. As well, people are going to tell you how to navigate the market, how to think about that solution category, when it's for you, when it's not for you, and things that you should think about if you want to be successful deploying these types of tools. So here you are, right? 100% virtual. You can do it from home in your pajamas. It's 3 mornings or at the office as well, right? With colleagues if you want to. And we're really packing it with as much value as possible so that as busy procurement professionals, you're in, you get the value, you're out, and you also get connected with other like-minded professionals that are trying to digitalize their functions in industries that are similar to yours, so that you're also getting that benefit from the event. So if you are still learning about this for the first time, I've got a QR code here for you. We're really being diligent on like who comes, making sure they're a good fit. They own a technology roadmap and they're wondering how to sequence it, or what the best pieces are in their context, in their industry, with their spend profile. So if that is you, scan the code here, fill out the survey. We got a couple questions to make sure it's a good fit. And then I'm getting back to people on a first come, first serve basis. We are nearing the end of our capacity. There's only going to be 60 people at the event. So really intimate feel. If it sounds like a good event for you, you have the chance to sign up here with this QR code. All right, now that's the housekeeping out of the way. Agenda for today, we're just going to talk quickly around what is an SRM solution, what does it do, what's the scope of it, with my guest from Graphite, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion here, change management strategies for SRM solutions. So change management, we've talked about a couple of times on the show for different solution categories, but we really want to dig into what are things you need to think about specifically for SRM solutions as it relates to change management. So letting architecture be your guide, because SRM is about bringing a whole bunch of different data dimensions together in a single place, thinking about how you're rolling out your deployment plan and how that should impact or influence your change management strategy, and vice versa. And then the 3 core audiences that you should consider when crafting that change management strategy. So a lot to unpack in the rest of the show here. And right before we get to the definition here, I'm going to get my guest here, Callie Yeldis. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Joel. I'm really excited. I like to always out myself first. I am the head of marketing here at Graphite. So I'm normally the person that procurement hates. And actually, my first experience with Graphite was as a user of it on the marketing team of a company that was about to go public and needed to clean up our procurement and our procurement strategies and all of our supplier data. And it was a welcome addition on the marketing side. We loved it as a tool. So I like to out myself because my expertise is in change management and how to help our customers here at Graphite really communicate out to the rest of their company internally and externally how to make that SRM rollout really successful. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And having had you on the show and having had discussions with you offline as well, I know you're also, very deep in terms of being able to talk shop and
Yes.
how these solutions fit together. So, don't be fooled by that introduction. Much more than just marketing chops in your profile. All right. So yeah, so let's get to it, right? What is a supplier relationship management solution? And as we're doing this, if you're watching live, you have access on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube to the chat, and you can ask questions, and I can either answer them myself, or if you want to ask questions around SRM to Callie and or around the Graphite product, we can also bring those into the discussion. So I always want to point that out. But yeah, here's the market map essentially that I put up every week, and we'll actually be discussing at the conference as well, right? Which is, this is a good way to conceptualize the software market and link it back to what you're doing as a procurement organization. And SRM is really the bottom quadrant here, the bottom third of the map, where it's all about onboarding, collecting data, offboarding the supplier, managing that end-to-end relationship and all the data that you need at different steps of that life cycle, depending on whether or not, are they a new supplier? Are they just in a sourcing project? Are they transactional with us? Do we have a contract, et cetera? You're going to need different types of data to be able to do compliance, governance, sustainability, just pay the supplier, right? And so that's how I view SRM, at least the scope of it, the potential scope of it. I'm curious to know, Callie, like, would you add anything to that definition or nuance it in any way?
You know what's interesting for me is that you have supplier risk management and third party risk management. That's maybe one of the number one things that we're seeing more and more teams. Especially in European companies or people doing business in Europe, the regulatory environment just continues to grow, right? And so partnering with those risk team members, and then maybe the contract management, I would add that as well, right? We live and die by contracts and procurement, right? We need to know what we need to negotiate on. We need to know what are the requirements. So I would only think that's the only thing I would put in there. But you have it up in strategic sourcing, but they all play interestingly together, right? We really work really closely with most of our customers doing just ongoing communication with suppliers. Hey, a warehouse is closed. You need to divert shipments to that warehouse to this place. Seems small, but when you don't know who the suppliers are that are going to be relevant to that communication, really hard to deliver it meaningfully, right? And so we help with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and quickly, right? Like, you may be able to do it, but you need 3 days to do the analysis and figure it out, right?
Agility is the number one priority for many CPOs this year. I was on yesterday with a customer who said flexibility and agility. Those are the big things that are important for him and his team going into 2026.
Yeah, and I love the way there's arrows all over this slide, right? Which is kind of illustrates what you're saying, which is no procure tech solution category is an island, so to speak, right? So there's always links between all of this that need to be made, but I like to conceptualize it in these blocks where, to another point you made, like, risk management solutions can be their own category, but to me, they fit into that wider SRM discussion.
Absolutely.
Cool. And so, you've already started going there, but I'd love for you to just give viewers a sense of who Graphite is and why I thought you were a good person to have this conversation with.
Yeah, so we're a leading supplier management solution in the space. What really differentiates Graphite, though, and makes us quite different than everyone else out there, is that we're built on a true network architecture. It's patented, so it can't be replicated. That network architecture essentially makes it like LinkedIn for suppliers and buyers to connect. We have over 700,000 suppliers who are actively managing profiles on the platform. And what that means is that every single month, over 1 million supplier updates cross our platform. What that means is that Asana has a supplier profile on our platform. They come in and they upload a new SOC document, and 18 of our customers are connected to them. This is a real case study. Let's say one of those customers, like Adobe, asks Asana to upload that new SOC document. That SOC document doesn't just get shared with Adobe. It actually is updated for the other 17 customers that are connected to that supplier, which can trigger remediation plans. It can update risk scores automatically. So while we talk about the supplier network, what I think is really the vision and what makes Graphite so different is you're actually taking advantage of the procurement work of all the other procurement teams that are interacting with your same shared supplier, which really differentiates us. It makes managing the supplier much easier, and it makes the data quality much higher. What that means from a functional perspective, it was 80%, now it's 85%, now it's actually 92% faster supplier onboarding is what we're seeing on average for our customers. If it's a network supplier, they onboard in 1 to 3 days. And that's mostly because of on the buyer side for reviews. We have created a 98% reduction in supplier support. That was actually for one of our customers, Paramount. And we have automated supplier data verification, global bank fraud protection. We just announced the Diamond Guarantee, which is us standing behind our multi-faceted security waterfall. To actually say, if you transact with a supplier who we've said applies and is verified for this Diamond Guarantee, and a fraudulent payment is created, we will guarantee that payment up to $250,000 ourselves. So no third-party insurance. This is us putting our money where our mouth is. And we processed, our data was used to process over $250 billion in payments for our customers last year. We had over 5,000 fraud attempts that were identified across all of our customer base, and 0 actual fraud that was successful. So we feel really confident in making this commitment to our customers, and really excited about that update to the platform that we just announced a week and a half ago.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of this. Pretty impressive, right? And I think that's probably where the LinkedIn analogy breaks down, in the sense where like anybody can create a profile on LinkedIn and there's minimal to 0 verification. And there's all, of this sludge, if I can term it that way, right? Whereas on your network, like everything's verified. Like, and I know your CEO, Conrad, has gotten on my case about this in the past, where it goes like, it's only as good as like the quality of the data. And we put so much thought and effort into verifying it, right? And I think you putting your money where your mouth is just a testament to you valuing that. And so, yeah, kudos.
Results don't lie too, right? Like, it's nice to know that it's a proven process, and we've augmented and updated it. But I think it actually speaks really nicely to the point that we're going to talk about today for change management. That update speaks really nicely to AP and finance teams, and sometimes procurement, if procurement owns that function in the business. But a supplier management tool goes way beyond just the reach and scope of procurement. It's going to be used by other stakeholders internally on a daily basis in some cases, and then in some cases maybe once a year. It needs to be applicable and usable by all of those people. And so, translating that to in a really solid change management strategy is absolutely critical to be successful and deliver those results for you on the procurement side.
Yeah, and I was gonna go in another direction, but I think that's too good a segue. We're gonna go straight to our discussion here around change management strategies, right? So you just laid it out, right? There's procurement as a stakeholder. Sometimes it can be the owner of the supplier data object, but there's all these other stakeholders which we outlined in the intro too, whether it's sustainability, compliance, finance, whoever else needs supplier data, right? AP, master data. And so coordinating all of those stakeholders when you're deploying one of these types of tools is a major challenge when I compare it to other solution categories, right? Where a sourcing tool, right? Maybe you have stakeholders, but they're much less involved than the owner procurement. It's their tool, right? They're using it from A to Z and administering it. Whereas with SRM, that dynamic's a bit different. So that being said, I'd love, Callie, to just get your take on how you think about this problem.
Yeah. So if you, our CEO, Conrad, who was the head of procurement at Adobe, he created this, what we call the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for procurement. If you're familiar with that concept, it's a psychology concept about, you need food and water, a basic human, and then all the way up to like emotional support, right? There's different need levels, and it's a maturity spectrum here. What we have found is that bad data quality tends to change how procurement functions in the organization. Most companies kind of get stuck in doing transaction management and basic RFP administration, maybe some basic negotiations, mostly because that is very time intensive and procurement is very resource constrained. For them to actually execute on these higher level and more strategic value add competencies that I know 90% of the procurement leaders that I talk to want to get there, right? And they are just like, I just can't because I'm so stuck in all this manual. They need better data to get up, to climb that ladder, to climb that pyramid. And what I think the reason I bring this up is because if you are implementing supplier management and you're cleaning up your data and you're cleaning up and reinventing and maybe reconfiguring your processes to be augmenting your P2P or S2P solution or your orchestration solution with a supplier management tool, you're going to start doing some of these business value add things. That's part of the vision of what you can start doing better, and maybe for the first time ever in the organization. And you need to, there's lots of process change in that, right? Your organization might be used to just sending you an email with a contract once it's already signed. And your responsibility has been getting that contract from onboarding all the way into the ERP and making sure the invoice is getting paid. Now you have to start transitioning from a change management perspective. Hey, this is the new process for how that's going to work, because we're going to automate it. We're going to make it much better. So that's number one. And then number two is then actually charting the course for what are the additional things we are going to start doing inside your business and your business, your department, your unit of business, to actually add more value. Are we going to start doing negotiations on your behalf? Are we going to, from a supplier management perspective, are you going to be the marketing leader, sending notes to your suppliers about updating stock reports, or am I going to start doing that now? All of those nitty gritty things are going to be important in your change management strategy as you start to develop and build out these competencies in your organization.
Yeah, and I think because there's so many of those stakeholders involved, like it's also piecemealing it out potentially and thinking, how do we do this in multiple passes, right? And we don't have to do this big bang where we're trying to align 12 different teams and departments.
Yeah, phase one is really saying, what are the things I'm currently doing? How are we going to change them? And how do we communicate those changes to the stakeholders so that they start following and adopting that new process? Phase two is now then the really fun stuff in my perspective, which is educating them on all the new things we're going to do for them in the business that's going to add value.
Cool. And I think it probably takes, and it leads into this architecture topic, right? But the question around, it probably is even more evident when you have multiple ERPs or multiple transactional systems instead of one. Right. So,
yeah, we like to think about it this way, right? So one of the true benefits of a supplier management platform and adding that to your procurement tech stack is the fact that you can get a true supplier 360. This can be the place where you sort by specific trigger points. So maybe it's what are my suppliers who have contracts in flight that haven't been completely signed or executed yet? What are my suppliers that are coming up for contract renewal, right? You're going to want to be pulling some of that data and updating statuses from your contracting tools or your e-signature tools. Maybe you have a CLM that you want to bring in there. That's a fully fledged CLM that legal loves. From a risk management perspective, talking to your risk and compliance teams, what are the really critical things that you want to action on as a procurement team and that they want to action on as a procurement team when a new supplier is coming in? Do you want to do financial viability checks? Are those really critical to your function? If so, you're probably going to want to bring in some of the data and intelligence tools like Dun & Bradstreet or Moody's or LSEG. Are you doing, is ESG critical to that supplier and to your business overall? Okay, now we want to start looking at Ditch Carbon, EcoVadis. What are the tools you want to pull in to start scoring those suppliers as they enter your system? And then what are the actions that your team or your risk stakeholders want to take on those items, right? Building this all in the implementation process, it needs to be really thoughtful. You want to build an ESG user group potentially. You want to build a risk user group. You want to build a legal user group, and you maybe have specific contract approvers, right? So it's really important in the implementation process. But then when you want to take a step back and start thinking about change management, you want to think of what are the activities that maybe legal is doing in DocuSign that they can actually do in Graphite now? What are the things that we're currently doing in Avetta that we want to do in Graphite now? And thinking about if we're getting that constant data stream, how do we actually change the way our teams are working on a day-to-day basis? And that really requires a lot of understanding from those teams and discussions ahead of launch with those teams about bringing them along on that journey so that they are really well-versed in the tool, but also thinking about how are they going to change their process and what are the potential barriers that we need to confront as a team together to make this a successful project.
And I think it only serves to illustrate, the point I was trying to make at the outset, which is like there's a lot of logos on this slide, right? And you probably have a lot of logos if you're a complex enterprise business. And so this is where really like deployment planning and change management go hand in hand, where the long pole in the tent of these projects is probably integration and then the change management related to the people for the related integration, right? So starting smaller where you're saying, okay, maybe we're just going to do the ERP systems and, legal with contract signature and DocuSign, like in that wave one. And so from a change management perspective, we only have to talk to procurement, AP, and legal, right? And then we can double back and have the integration team speak to, our risk management systems or the data intelligence providers that we want to integrate as well. And then that gives us a foundation on which to add on new supplier dimensions, the data dimensions, new change management dimensions as well, right? Is that how you guys sort of think about it?
Absolutely. And you're not going to, very few customers, if any, especially our big multinational global enterprises, are doing everything goes live at once approach. We don't recommend it. It tends to be better to start small and then build out. And you can do that in a number of ways. But one of the ways that I think is a really critical one is like you said, letting the architecture be your guide. We really think about this, regional rollouts. We really feel strongly that's an important strategy that we see executed extremely successfully. We think about this, we like to say, we call it a copy paste or an 80-20 model. Most organizations are thinking about, when they think about regional rollouts, there's a large kind of, maybe it's like mothership model that, hey, we want this to be the core 80% of what we're doing process-wise for every single region. But then there might be specific things. Maybe in Mexico, there's a specific tax requirement, a specific document that needs to be collected in onboarding. Maybe in Germany, there's specific ESG requirements that require compliance that you want to make sure their process is a little bit different for XYZ reason. We always want to be thinking about how do we roll out in waves to the different regions, because once you get that 80% tried and true and tested with that first region, then you have de-risked the rest of your regional rollouts, and it's exponentially faster to roll out from there because your 80% is locked, loaded, tested, it's running, it's humming, and then that 20% is limits the scope of discussion and helps you also from a change management perspective, give others some time to actually get acquainted with what is that 80% that is already in place. And they can actually work with other stakeholders in that region to also understand and get trained by it as well. And it helps you understand what are the main questions I'm going to need to help answer. So we think about it, mobilize and design that, focus on that 80% of workflows and data fields. That's going to be that mothership model. And then focus on your waves. I tend to say start with the least complex, right? So what is going to be, maybe your first one that you're going to go out with is going to be 90% because they are fine standardizing to what 100% of what you'd like. And then you can start with maybe the next one down. What's the one that's going to, and then end with the trickiest, because they're going to have so much more confidence in the project if you've successfully done wave 1, 2, and 3. And then wave 4, you can start to really focus on the nitty-gritty details. Yeah. And then the optimization, you really want to also see like what teams are adopting this, who's actually using it, where are the bottlenecks in my process because IT is not in there approving vendors fast enough, or they're confused by this question or this workflow. That helps you get over a lot of those adoption hurdles faster.
And it's, to tie it back to what we were just saying around architecture, like I might cycle through this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 with multiple dimensions of my supplier data object, right? Like I might do this thing just for transactional data and general onboarding, right? And then roll it out, as you say, to the simpler business units, and then get more of a hockey stick benefit chart where at the end is where I'm getting the bigger business units that have the most spend or the most complexity, but that's where all the efficiency benefits come from. But at least I've given myself maturity and time to grow that maturity with the tool and with our integrations and whatever bugs could come as we're rolling out the solution, and then double back and come back for sustainability, come back for risk and compliance and all this good stuff, right?
I think one other thing I just want to call out too is that, I know we keep saying integration, and I think a lot of people, 5 years ago, everyone thinks that's APIs. Now Graphite is actually developing an MCP server for those who are not super technical on AI. What's really cool about that is it enables a bring your own agent strategy. So think about this from the perspective too of what are the data pieces that you want to surface from that MCP server, so that where are the pieces of your business that are really ahead of the game on AI also that are building their own agents that want to leverage that data really quickly and easily. It's a whole different vector of how you're thinking about the change management there too. The exciting thing is it's going to enable faster integration in a lot of cases because it's agents talking to agents instead of APIs talking to APIs. And there's so many limitations to that, right? And ideally, it increases stakeholder adoption as well because they don't have to set up an API integration to start leveraging it. They can start just setting up, hey, here's my agent. I'm going to have my agent in DocuSign start talking to my agent in Graphite and let the two talk to each other and be that connector, which is really exciting and innovative part of the platform right now.
And or where my head goes as soon as you said that is like, I have an enterprise LLM license, whether it be Claude, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever else, right? And I can connect that to the MCP as well, and then start pulling my my SRM data in a much more organic fashion, and just creating dashboards on the fly and analysis on the fly as well. So
Absolutely.
that's
It's a
very
whole
interesting.
new world, and it's an exciting world. We're seeing a lot more teams come in and say, I want to build my own agent and then connect it into Graphite, because that agent is going to do something so specific to my business that there's no way that Graphite's going to build it fast enough. I have 18 hours, 1,000 hours of expertise that you guys don't have, which is we very much welcome that, right? We want to make sure that that data quality foundation is there so that you can build those agents that are going to operate with each other in order to protect your data, right? Like that tends to be the blocker on a lot of AI projects today, is IT is worried about adding in new agents, new LLMs. If you're doing it on your own Copilot, you're doing it on your own Gemini, or whatever your enterprise LLM solution is, then it always is easy to innovate quickly there.
Yeah, no, and more, and we could do a whole other show on this.
Good.
But data is the moat, and I see our time flying here. So
Yes.
We'll get to this third part here, right around just what are the types of people or audiences people should consider.
Yeah.
And we hinted at it as we were going along here, but more explicitly when you're doing change management in the SRM solutions.
Yeah. So first off is that internal center of excellence or tiger team. I like the term tiger team personally, but that's just me being a startup girl. Yeah. So the big things, and Joel, if you don't mind clicking ahead for that COE, these are your promoters. I think about this as a marketer. These are your champions, your internal folks who are really deep in the implementation piece of the project and now have pride of ownership and are going to go out and be your megaphones within their business units. So we really strongly stress IT, finance, risk compliance, legal. They all need really strong representation here, not just from a technical perspective, but truly from who are people in their organization going to listen to? Think about that when you're creating this tiger team. The second is that the go live rollout plan. This is someone I've done internal comms for companies. Include your internal comms teams. They love this kind of change management, and they're really, really good at assisting here. So don't just think about I have to roll this out myself. Really involve those internal communication teams as well, if you have the luxury of having that in place. And really, these are the 4 core responsibilities for these stakeholders. Number 1, they need to be product experts. In your hypercare stage, before you do your official go live, they need to know their use cases backwards and forwards. They need to know Graphite backwards and forwards, and make sure that they can answer quick questions, because a marketing coordinator may be much more likely to ask the VP of marketing, who's your internal champion, about the nitty gritty than they are going to ask a procurement person they may have never interacted with. The second is, you need to train your teams on the core use case. Expect them to train their teams on the core use cases for them. So if they are in legal, they need to walk them through a contract process. When are contracts being collected? What are the process changes between what you're currently doing and what you're expected to do moving forward? And they need to create an open communication channel for them to identify bugs. The third is, like I said, they're your champion. They need to champion it internally, set expectations of what does that actually look like? I like Brene Brown as a term, paint the picture. Paint the picture for them of what that looks like. Are they all posting on LinkedIn that day? Are they sending out Slack communications or Teams communications in their department channels? The last is also, again, that feedback. They are your strongest opportunity for a feedback loop post-launch. And I have another consideration for your broader stakeholders, but this internal COE, you need to gather their feedback, but also have them gathering their team's feedback. So they are a conduit for you. Really, really important team here, and bringing them along on this journey is probably the number 1 priority for change management.
Very cool. And it's so funny, right? Because the audience we speak to on the show is mostly procurement professionals, right? And in all these change management episodes, like procurement's the main person that needs to pull this forward, and I don't see them on your slide, right? So I guess that begs the question: who is typically leading these SRM projects in the clients that you have that are most successful?
Yeah.
And what can procurement learn from that? Because a lot of time, like, procurement may be a driver of this, but from what you're putting out there, they shouldn't necessarily be the lead or the owner.
Yeah, if you have an internal COE, that center of excellence is really, we see a lot of that. If you're in a very large organization, you might have a procurement transformation role in particular, who's that kind of figurehead stakeholder driving this. The CPO obviously leads out from how do you make sure that the executive level down really understands the project and what's going to change. Often it's joining hands with IT and finance as well. They tend to be the most impacted by the implementation of a supplier management tool. But really our recommendation is get at the very least your CPO, your CFO, and your CIO or CTO should be hand in hand being the champions of this. Cool. That second audience that you mentioned though, Joelle, is we've talked internal. I actually think the second most important is your suppliers, right? You're going to need to create a lot of change management materials. At Graphite, we provide a whole change management package for customers with some basics that they can then go in and modify, add their own logos. You really need to think about this in 3 subgroups. You have your legacy suppliers who you're no longer doing business with, but exist in your ERP, your active suppliers, and then any new suppliers coming in. New suppliers coming in are probably the easiest group to deal with. You're just sending them the invitation link. They don't know anything's changed, but they may identify flaws in your process, gaps in your process, and you may need to just create additional materials for them as you go through supplier support. The second is those active suppliers. These are the people who you may be starting to build in new competencies like performance management that you've never done with these active suppliers before, helping them understand A, when to go into Graphite and updating their information, how to verify and validate that information, and B, what are the new things you're going to start working on with them. And then last are those legacy suppliers. We have our customers handle legacy suppliers in very different ways. It really depends on the priority within the organization and the size of the legacy supplier base. Some like to phase it out over the first year of rollout. Some say when we get them, we get them. If we do business with them, we'll bring them in. We recommend phasing them out in through that process so we can really clean up, especially the financial data, and make sure there's no vendor fraud issues down the road with that legacy supplier profile, and make sure it's really clean in the ERP. From a cadence perspective, 2 weeks before you launch, this is a really important, you want to talk to those active and legacy suppliers, alert them to the change. Some of those legacy suppliers may go in and update automatically, but you may not, you may have to chase them, down the road. That's one thing Graphite's quite good at actually, is helping to chase those suppliers for you. And then you also really want to engage, and I would say this is pre 2 weeks, you really want to start engaging your IT and your marketing teams, because whoever owns your corporate website, if you have a supplier portal currently or a P2P solution that exists on a landing page on your domain, updating that page with and introducing Graphite is a really important piece of the process to make sure they understand, what do I do in the P2P or S2P tool? What do I do? And what do I do in Graphite? What is supplier management? They are not procurement experts, these suppliers, right? So they don't know the difference. They have no understanding, very little understanding for the most part of the market. So bringing them along on that journey and making sure that those website updates are made is really critical. And then lastly, again, like I mentioned, legacy suppliers, once your optimization phase is done for your first go live, then you can start digging in on legacy suppliers a bit more. I mean, we still have customers from 4 years ago that are chasing maybe 10% of their legacy supplier base from when they started using Graphite. And some of it is just, they just can't, they want to get to that 100% internally. They want to have all those ERP records checked and updated and validated. But for many of them, it's not the highest business priority. It's more of a check the box. Let's get them in. Yeah.
And I mean, eventually 18, 24 months down the line, you may be able to purge your supplier vendors if you haven't done, or supplier records if you haven't done anything.
One of the best things about Graphite and supplier management is handling that offboarding is also really critical, right? How are we going to purge that record and do it properly? And then the last thing is, I think about this group of department heads. So I talked about that COE, but you probably have folks who are in, your business development group who may need to onboard a vendor who they're not going to be in the weeds on the process, but they need to, the vendors they're onboarding definitely have contracts. They definitely have a contract negotiation process. You need to identify also the potential top detractors. So not just like push your champions to be promoters, but also think about who are the people who currently are the loudest, maybe complaining about the process or complaining about supplier onboarding or complaining about ongoing management. How do you do a pre-launch kind of hype session to get them to become champions? There's a real opportunity. It's not a challenge. I don't think about it that way. It's actually a real opportunity to bring them along and say, hey, we've started fixing some of these things that you've been upset about. let's get you up to speed on how this is working, because there's nothing more impactful than someone who used to be a hater now becoming an absolute fanatic about the platform. That increases adoption across the board. You definitely want to make sure that the department heads also are just really doing good cascading of information company-wide. If you have an intranet, putting materials on there. We often have a lot of companies who use their Teams or Slack channel and create a project launch Slack channel of sorts so they can answer questions day of and in the weeks that follow. And then they eventually archive or turn off that channel once they are really settled. And then also we really recommend probably 4 weeks out from launch doing a quick NPS survey. That's a net promoter score. You ask them from 0 to 10, would you recommend using this platform to another employee at insert your company name? NPS, a really good NPS score is like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you want to rinse and repeat throughout the process. You want to continue to go out to them, especially as you introduce some of those new competencies. Maybe you're doing now negotiations within your tool. Maybe you're doing performance management and adding and layering on those business value add competencies. You want to continue to take that NPS score on a regular basis so you can continue to optimize your process.
Yeah, and and those 2 second ones, whether it's suppliers or department head, or also like consider it like the company at large. Like my mind immediately goes to like, are you creating supplier and or internal procurement communities, right? Where you're pushing out this information on a continuous basis, not just for SRM, but for any other things that you may be pushing out as procurement updates to systems, to processes, to policies, to procedures, to whatever, right? Wins, celebrating your wins, and making sure that the culture of procurement in your organization is one of continuous improvement and education and communication.
The last piece of advice I will say is that no matter how sophisticated your internal or external audience, there's a saying, I started my career in journalism, so I like to use the saying, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Like, yep. And that part of that is just make sure that your communications are really clear and you're not boiling the ocean with trying to communicate every different process that's changing all at the same time. Yep. Try to be really targeted in your approach and clear and simple in your messaging. And that's going to be overall how you make this a successful launch.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it's it makes me think of like, go leverage, yes, your change management teams or an external change management resource if you don't have one, but also your marketing team, right? And just in messaging, like that, you have the expertise potentially within your business, just hiding in plain sight sometimes as well, right? So
absolutely.
Callie, thanks so much for coming on the show. As you see, if you're watching online on the left-hand side, you're still not reading the newsletter. That's where I send all the information on the show, on everything that we do, on best practice articles, that sort of thing on a weekly basis. And I know you also prepared something for viewers as well, right?
Yeah, we have a SRM maturity assessment. So this is it can be a little bit of a gut check. What are you looking to do next in your procurement organization? Come in, answer a couple of questions for us, and we can kind of benchmark you and give you our honest opinion about, are you ready? What are the things you need to put in place before you're ready for that supplier management platform? Because it definitely closes a lot of gaps in your P2P or S2P where there's maybe things that you want to do better that are important for your organization. But creating that plan of where you want to go first is really critical to make sure that that supplier management investment is really, the ROI is seen, not just from your team, but internally among the stakeholders.
I love it. I love it. So if you have, if you have some questions or you're wondering where to start, I think that SRM assessment is probably a good tool to help you do that, help you think about that. And Callie, I'll thank you once again for coming on the show this week. And we're excited to have you and host you at the conference later this month as well. Happy Easter to you, to everybody watching online as well. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks so for having me, Joelle. Bye-bye.
Bye.